Assassin's Creed should be a fantastic game. The core concept is amazing. You have a target, you spend some time gathering information about your target, and then use that information to figure out how to assassinate them. In concept, the game should be incredible. In practice, Assassin's Creed's execution deserves execution. This game was such a chore to play that I was considering quitting within 2 hours of my 14-hour playthrough to preserve my sanity. The amount of meaningless, repetitive missions that you're forced to play through, and the amount of slow, boring, and unskippable cutscenes that you're forced to sit through makes the gameplay between what little time you do spend assassinating people so frustrating and unpleasant to play that it turns into an experience that I cannot recommend to even my worst enemies. I usually like to play through games I review at least twice. However, I couldn't bring myself to even look at Assassin's Creed again once the credits rolled, and honestly, I don't think I have to, because in my one single blind playthrough of this game, I felt like I had played the exact same game 9 times. To illustrate exactly what Assassin's Creed does wrong, and to showcase what little it does right, I'm going to be explaining the entire game, from pressing play to credits, and exploring its gameplay as well as its narrative. This video is not a review, as the length might have indicated, although I think in these few paragraphs and the title of the video, I've summed up exactly how I feel about the game. The rest of it will be explaining exactly why. Since it is a long video, I've placed timestamps in the description, separating it out into bite-sized segments, so you don't have to dedicate an hour of your undivided attention to watch this. If you haven't played Assassin's Creed, and for some reason still want to, there will be spoilers from here on out, although I highly recommend that you avoid this game like the plague.
You've got a problem. I can't anchor him to the memory. Too much psychological trauma. He's rejecting the treatment, retreating.
Assassin's Creed begins in what almost feels like the middle of a story. You're in control of what looks like an assassin, but the world is glitching out like it's built in a computer. You hear 2 voices arguing, telling someone named Desmond to relax, and to be quite honest, this wasn't what I was expecting, although I won't let that affect my appraisal of the game. The voices explain that you're coming out now, and you're introduced to the 3 main characters. The main plot of the game revolves around these 3 people. Desmond, your player character, has been kidnapped by Vidic and Lucy, being forced to run experiments in this machine called the Animus. The Animus allows us to relive the lives of our ancestors, whose memories are passed down to us when we are born, as this world's way of explaining instincts. Desmond's ancestor, Altair, knows a bit of information that Vidic wants through witnessing some event. However, Desmond is incompatible with that specific memory, so instead they have to start the memory he is compatible with and relive Altair's life all the way up to that moment. We're not even 5 minutes into the game and I already have a question. What's the difference between the target memory and this memory? Lucy explains that Desmond lacks the ability to step into his ancestor's body.
You lack the confidence to step into your ancestor's body. That's what happened earlier.
So why is this memory any different? Why can Desmond access this memory and not that one? I put a lot of thought into it, and the only reason I can think up of is that there needs to be a video game. There needs to be levels and progression and an excuse for saving, loading, and checkpoints to be present in the 12th century. That's the only reason I can think of. Please let me know if the hypnosis reasoning the game provides does actually explain this and I'm just ignorant.
They can't jump directly into the specific memory. They need to be eased in.
And what happens if the most recent compatible memory was Altair's birth? I mean, like, what the fuck would they do then? After this exposition scene, Lucy loads up the tutorial program, and we're introduced to the game's mechanics. Moving, running, assassinating people, all explained here in a slow, long, and tedious tutorial. I'll discuss the gameplay later in the video, for now we'll just acknowledge that the game has a forced tutorial to play through, and while playing it, I was thinking to myself, why didn't they just do a tutorial and a scripted narrative sequence with pop-ups that explains the controls in safe environments that allows me to experiment with them? It will be better paced by getting exposition and tutorial out of the way at the same time, so I can get to the good stuff, the assassinations, faster. So then imagine my surprise when the game threw me into a scripted narrative sequence with pop-ups that explains the controls in safe environments, allowing me to experiment with them immediately after this tutorial. Well, since we're here, I'm going to walk through this narrative sequence because we're 20 minutes into the game and all we've had is tutorials and narrative sequences, so allow me to analyze it. We're introduced to Altair, the best and greatest assassin in the land, who's also arrogant. Quite original. Altair and these 2 assassin guys, one who's named Malik and his brother, whose name doesn't matter because he dies, have been ordered to collect this treasure from Solomon's temple for reasons that don't matter aside from
all that matters is the master considers it important.
You guide Altair through this section, kill a Templar, and oh look, the treasure's right there, and it's here we're introduced to Robert de Subler, leader of the sworn enemy of the assassins, the Templars. Altair suggests killing Robert to easily get the treasure, but Malik stops him because we might dishonor the creed by not being discreet.
No. We were asked to retrieve the treasure and deal with Robert only if necessary. Discretion, Altair.
I like how Malik is scolding Altair for suggesting not being discreet while speaking at full volume with the Templars right there. How the fuck are they still hidden? Also, didn't we already kill a Templar to get here, and you didn't object to that, so I don't see the problem with killing these guys. Now, Altair is an assassin, so like every good assassin, he just jumps down and directly confronts his target just to get his ass kicked. Robert mutters something about the Holy Land being lost to his master, and flee before we come to kill you, all, you know, standard bad guy stuff, and he throws Altair out the doorway and it collapses when he does that. How are they gonna get the treasure out
Before sunrise
now? Just in case you didn't realize that Robert and his Templar buddies were gonna kill Malik and his brother, this happens.
Men, to arms! Kill the assassins!
You know, just in case someone without a brain happens to play this game. After this, Altair escapes and returns to Messiah, the assassin city. Upon arrival, Altair is told where he can meet the Master, twice, and then he explains to him that he failed. The Master is very displeased. You were my best student and you failed, you know, quite the original piece of storytelling. And then he's interrupted by Malik, who escaped the Templars with the treasure, who followed him here to retrieve it. Altair is instructed to go defend the city, so we go do that. This is where the game introduces its combat, and like all the other gameplay elements, I'll discuss them in one big swoop, but it's important to note that Altair takes these guards down with very little hassle. It makes you wonder why Altair just doesn't become a knight. You fight your way down to the bottom of the hill just to hear that the Templars have broken through and you have to retreat back to the top. Thankfully the game fast travels us there. I demand that you give me back my treasure. Get the fuck out of my city before I kill more of you. But we have killed so many of you. Give up. We do not fear death. Show them. If you do not fear death, then we shall give it to you. Ha ha ha. Petty fool. You've activated my trap card. Da. That was fucking retarded.
You did well to drive Robert from here.
What the fuck did Altair do? Kill a few goons and let the logs loose? Those logs that someone else put there? After driving the Templars out of Messiah, the Master scolds Altair for killing an innocent, fair enough, forgetting how to be an assassin, also fair enough,
Hold, Templars!
and for bringing the Templars to Messiah, even though it was clearly Malik that brought them here. Regardless, Altair gets called a traitor, gets stabbed with a very poorly timed grunt, and it's finally the end of the scripted tutorial. The narrative sequence is very poor. All we learn is that Altair is the best, the greatest, and the most arrogant. The treasure is important, and anyone with half a brain would realize it's the same treasure that Vidic is after. The Templars and the Assassins hate each other, and they both want the treasure. It took me 50 words to explain that. I finished this narrative tutorial sequence after roughly 50 minutes, and we learned so little about the story that all of this could have just been mentioned in conversations with some clever writing if the writers cared enough to do that. We don't even learn about who the Assassins are or the Templars are, apart from one group as Assassins and the other group are Crusaders, which needed to be stated just in case someone without a brain happened to be playing this game. If concealing core details about each of the two factions is supposed to be a sick parallel to Desmond's situation, then it's a job well done, but he sacrificed all of my interest in paying attention to this narrative sequence to do so I guess the execution deserves execution. Lucy pulls Desmond out of the Animus to let him rest, much to Vidic's disapproval, but she sternly tells him to listen to her, and that they'll discuss it in the conference room, leaving Desmond to do whatever. Then you're in control, and it's here I get to discuss the gameplay between the gameplay. You get to slowly move Desmond around the room and find things to interact with. The challenge of this area is controlling the camera, so you can see what you're doing, which is really frustrating considering that the game can sometimes move at complete random. Eventually you stumble into your quarters, where you can eavesdrop on the conversation between Vidic and Lucy through this vent. Don't ask how. It's all a bunch of mumbo-jumbo. Vidic is Lucy's superior, so he doesn't want her undermining his authority. He threatens Lucy by mentioning something that happened to someone named Layla, I think, who I assume was his previous assistant, and she reminds him that despite their deadline at the end of the week, that if they exposed Desmond to the Animus too much, it could kill him, leaving them with nothing. A lot of the dialogue in this conversation isn't very important to the plot, except for the part that using the Animus for too long could be fatal. You'd think that a normal person who was kidnapped and forced into using the Animus might freak out about that, but Desmond reacts like oil being poured into a glass of water.
Man, I can't even change my clothes.
He simply walks out, doesn't even mention it to Vidic or Lucy, and he continues to use the Animus without any fear or uncertainty or any other emotion aside from mildly irritated, despite knowing that the Animus could kill him.
If you push him too hard, he'll shut down, and then we'll have nothing.
This is where I stopped caring about Desmond's character, because this reaction is so inhuman and unbelievable that Vidic's kidnapping team must have forgotten to kidnap his brain.
Damn it, they locked the door.
You awake the next morning to Vidic standing over you, which is...
Gotta say, that's a little creepy, Doc. You been watching me sleep?
We're always watching you. Now get up.
This is where I noticed something quite smart and subtle. The wide shot we're seeing this from. We're not seeing this from Desmond's point of view, no. We're seeing this like it was a recording from a security camera, as indicated by this filter attached to the shot, which is either just security, or it's Vidic's employees ensuring that their team is working hard and making meaningful progress, which will explain this camera shot peering over the Animus. This little detail made me wonder who's behind the camera, and for once this is a bit of storytelling where concealing details is done right, because it adds mystery and intrigue without sacrificing anything, so the execution deserves praise. However, this does raise a few problems I'll bring up later. Desmond walks back into the Animus, loads the next memory, and we're back as playing as Altair. As punishment for his dishonor towards the Creed, Altair has been stripped of his rank, and is forced to earn back everything he once had so he can hopefully be humbled, somehow, and so that Assassin's Creed can have a progression system without it being forced. After Altair's abysmal attempt on Robert's life, the Master tells him that he must once again learn how to be an assassin, and we better not be going into we're going back into another fucking tutorial. I mean that I understand that making your games accessible is something to consider if you want to maximize your sales, but how many brainless people do you think will be playing the game if you think that one obvious tutorial and two scripted narrative-based tutorials are necessary? Why can't you just let us play through the game and guide us using pop-ups, allowing us to figure out the details and learn from our mistakes along the way? You know, sort of how a video game works? Anyway, there's a traitor in the midst to help the Templars get into Messiah by opening the gates, so it really wasn't Altair's fault at all that the Templars attacked, and to find the traitor, you go through what the game calls its investigation phase. So, Altair goes out to learn about the traitor. You eavesdrop on a conversation and learn about a basket weaver who's the messenger, pickpocket his letter to go help you find the traitor, Masoon, listen to his rant, yes I did spend this time making it look like Altair was beat Masoon off, take him to the Master, just so that he can kill him, but for real this time, not like the pathetic shit he did to Altair. Now, since we're here at a slow point of the game, let me bring up the way that cutscenes are done. There are no cinematic cutscenes, they're all auto-generated using the in-game models, and it gives you the option to change the camera perspective whenever a glitch pops up. A glitch are these distracting things that pop up across the entire screen and makes an awful sound effect, so their mere existence is bad, but their existence is also very confusing, because the camera cuts that happens when you interact with one of these glitches isn't an optional viewpoint, it's generally a cut that matches with the dialogue. There's an example here where Malik brings the treasure, a glitch pops up and I'm late to react, so the cut to the treasure being brought in was late and didn't match with Malik's dialogue at all.
Here, take it.
This way of doing cutscenes is confusing because Assassin's Creed is driven solely by its narrative, so I have no clue as to why they didn't try to make these slow and unskippable cutscenes slightly more cinematic. The cuts the glitches makes improves the storytelling, and the game wants you to interact with these glitches, so it really makes me wonder why the cuts aren't just done automatically. It would make the scenes of a story-driven game more cinematic, and I wouldn't be constantly distracted throughout every cutscene by them. As a reward for finding the traitor, Altair is awarded his stuff back, and then is given a list of 9 men who need to die.
Have you any questions?
Only where I need begin.
Ooh, I have a question. Where the hell did this list of 9 people come from? You're told that they're corrupt and that they're ensuring the Crusades continue, because this game is set during the Third Crusade in case you didn't know, and that killing them will stop the Crusade. How was this information obtained? How does the Master know about these people? Who are these 9 people exactly and why do we need to kill them? There's so much to question here, but
All that matters is the Master considers it important.
so I guess I should shut the fuck up, stop thinking, and continue to play along. So now, finally, the tutorial's over, so now I can finally get to the good game.
Altair, it seems my students do not fully understand what it is to wield the blade. Perhaps you could show them what you know.
But before we can get to the gameplay, we're interrupted for a combat tutorial that the second tutorial brought up. I understand that this tutorial is optional, you can quit as soon as you begin, but starting the tutorial isn't optional. so this is officially the game's 4th tutorial. So, to break it down in just under an hour, I've only watched narrative cutscenes and completed tutorials. This is fantastic if you like a brain, you definitely can't miss anything, but for anyone else, this is just blatantly insulting. Past that tutorial, we're finally allowed to play the game. The open world opens up. Yes, this game does have an open world, and you're free to explore and do whatever. Now, I can totally understand why the cities are large maps. It's vital to the game's core concept. However, I can't explain to you why Kingdom exists. This large, pointless, glorified loading screen has nothing to do in it aside from climb viewpoints to reveal the map, which I'll get to, and to collect flags. Yes, in a game all about tracking down and hunting 9 targets, you can waste time by collecting flags. I think there's about 100 of them in each level, and I didn't collect them all because why the fuck would I? These serve no purpose to the gameplay aside from filling it with busy work for people who need a good waste of time to sink their teeth in. The problem I have with the flags isn't from a gameplay stance, however. Much like this game, they're completely optional. My issue is that it breaks the narrative. As a reminder, Desmond is reliving Altair's life. You play as Desmond, not Altair, and the only reason for Desmond to be playing these memories is so he can replay this final memory that contains information Vidic and Lucy needs. Vidic is on a strict deadline. He needs to obtain this information by the end of the week. So why in the name of fuck would they even allow Desmond to waste precious time collecting flags that are littered around the map? It makes no sense. Even worse, you're reliving Altair's life. What in the name of fuck was Altair doing collecting flags that are completely meaningless? Why the fuck are the flags even there in the first place? Their existence simply makes no sense in the world that Assassin's Creed has established. There's a term for this called ludonarrative dissonance, which refers to the game's gameplay and the game's narrative constantly clashing and contradicting each other. Say, for instance, in a shooter, you have to kill the supreme bad guy. In gameplay, to get to him, you mercilessly kill all of his goons who try to stop you. But when you get to the bad guy, there's a narrative sequence where you discover that the supreme bad guy isn't there, and there's a goon in his place acting as a double. Instead of killing the goon like in the gameplay, your character decides that he shouldn't kill the double because he doesn't deserve to die. It just makes no fucking sense. You might be wondering why I'm bringing this up, and it's for 2 reasons. One is that ludonarrative dissonance has so many syllables that using it makes me sound smart enough to feature on I Am Very Smart, and because the term itself was coined by a man named Clint Hocking on the 7th of October 2007, a full month before Assassin's Creed's console release. Clint Hocking was working for Ubisoft when this blog was released, so having one of their games containing an element of this is bizarre. Another problem I have with Kingdom is that the game already showed us that it's willing to fast forward memories to act as fast travel, so why the game didn't just fast forward me to the cities is beyond me. Removing Kingdom would streamline the experience, its existence provides nothing but filler to the game. After travelling, you arrive at your first city, Damascus. When you arrive at the city, you're prompted with a pop-up guiding you to save a citizen. Holy shit, Assassin's Creed can use pop-ups during gameplay to teach its players new mechanics. Makes you really wonder why there's 4 tutorials before this. Since this is the first introduction to combat gameplay wise, this will be my first proper look at it. The combat is fucking dreadful, it's uninteresting and unengaging, and to be honest, it isn't a fault of the controls. Altair, for an assassin, is surprisingly capable at sword fighting. He can attack, block, and parry, all with various X commands, and later he can dodge and break grabs. These aspects of the combat are completely meaningless because Altair is the best swordsman in the whole game. The game gives you so many defensive options that are all vastly inferior to countering, because when you counter, you can also instantly kill your assailant, so I don't know why dodging and blocking are even options. The only useful ability you're awarded combat-wise is the break grab, which is just another form of countering. This attack parry fighting mechanic does actually hold some potential to be interesting, if the enemies themselves were interesting. The game first introduces its combat in the tutorial by having you kill some guards. The first gameplay introduction to the combat has you killing some guards. The final fight of the game has the exact same AI attached to it as the guards, so they're basically just guards. And yes, the master betrays you, in case his Saruman appearance didn't already give it away. The point I'm making is that the enemies that you fight and are supposed to be threatening throughout the entire game remains exactly the same, just plain old guards. While playing, I noticed that the ones wearing hats and helmets were more adept at blocking my attacks, and that's the only difference I found between every enemy in the game. It took me 14 hours to beat Assassin's Creed, so having the combat remain as difficult and interesting as it was in the tutorial is definitely not a good thing. And because Altair is the best fucking swordsman in the land, combat is ridiculously easy. Low-level guards don't understand how to counter, so you just spam attacks at them until you break their defensive stance and then you kill them, countering when necessary. When versing more adept opponents, you can either spam attacks and hope they don't counter you, or sit tight and wait for your opponents to attack you and counter all of their attacks, and if that doesn't instantly kill them, they're knocked to the ground for some free hits. That's the entire combat system. It isn't the fault of the simple controls, it's the fault of the boring and predictable guards you fight. I managed to get through every combat encounter except for one by spamming X and occasionally pressing right trigger to counter, and I would win every time. I didn't die once. Because of how insultingly easy the combat is, it renders the guards as non-threats. These guys can't touch Altair if I cared to pay enough attention while playing, so why should I be concerned when the guards chase me? I can just kill them, regardless of how outnumbered I am, so it removes all the tension the game could provide. It also renders the entire hide from the guards part of the gameplay completely obsolete, because if you kill all your assailants, you become hidden again, and it was often less hassle to kill my pursuers than it was to escape. It's a shame too, because a lot of care and planning went into designing these cities so that you could break line of sight and hide from your pursuers, so it really is a shame that I could practically ignore it for the entire game. After Altair kills the guards and saves the citizens, you're prompted to blend in with the scholars to bypass the guards preventing you from entering the city. Since this was the start of the game, I followed the game's instruction, and watched Altair blend in with these scholars as they began their slow-paced, lazy walk, all the way from where you find them, to all the way past these guards. This sequence takes a whole minute. I really wish I was exaggerating. You watch these guys walk into the city for one whole fucking minute. Once inside, you're prompted to find the viewpoint of the city to survey the city, revealing both the map and the investigation missions, and it's here I'd like to bring up the history that the game is based on. The Holy Land, where Assassin's Creed is set, is faithful to how history depicts it. I'm not very knowledgeable in the history of the Third Crusade, so I did some digging, and almost all of Assassin's Creed's plot points and events are true to how history depicts them. The cities look like 12th century cities, and there are 3 cities in the game. Damascus, Acre, and Jerusalem are all held by either the Crusaders or the Saracens, exactly as they were historically, and all of Altair's in-game targets did go missing during this time. A lot of effort went into recreating the Holy Land, and while I disagree with including Kingdom just because it's historically accurate, I can admire the hard work that went into the research and the recreation of the Middle East. Credit where credit is due. The inclusion of the Animus also explains exactly why Assassin's Creed's story doesn't quite match up to the history it's based on, which Vidic brings up to Desmond later on, which I thought was a nice touch. But since this is the only thing that Assassin's Creed does well, I can stop being nice now. Climbing to the top of the viewpoints is boring, and you have to climb these viewpoints to find out where the investigation missions are located. Do you have to climb the viewpoints to access the missions? No, but good luck finding them in a city where every citizen looks the same. To synchronize with the viewpoint, you must finish the slow and tedious climb to reach the top, press Y to synchronize with it, and then jump off to reveal only a tiny area of the map around you, despite the view you can see from up there. Sometimes in these tiny areas there will be some missions for you to complete. Other times the viewpoints won't reveal a single one. So to ensure you haven't missed anything, you have to complete this slow, tedious climb to the top of 79 towers, many of which are just cut and paste throughout the entire game. There's also another 12 in Kingdom, but why? To be frank, I didn't enjoy climbing these towers. It wasn't interesting or engaging. These towers could have become a puzzle, try and find their way up this vertical maze, and one tower does that. The clear majority are completed by holding the directional stick in one way and waiting for Altair to lazily climb up there. Some people love this gameplay, but it was far too boring for me to pay any attention to. After climbing the viewpoint, you're prompted to complete all the missions they reveal. One of these is a filler Save the Citizen mission, the same as we did to get in here, except this time you get to do it a dozen times per level for a total of 108 times. On the plus side, completing it is optional and can be completely ignored, much like the rest of this game. These citizen missions are boring. You kill the guards and you talk to the citizen, and that's it. And by having a side quest that the game wants you to complete to be completed by killing guards while outnumbered in a direct confrontation, it really makes you wonder why you should still treat them as threats. When you save the citizen, you talk to them. You listen to their long-winded, slow, lazy, unskippable thank you while the game wrestles camera control away from you to do so. The game then locks the camera onto your reward, either a group of scholars to hide in or a group of vigilantes which will block guards pursuing you if you run past them. These rewards sound good, complete an optional side mission to make escaping the guards easier to do, except there's a problem. There's no incentive to run from the guards, because Altair is the best swordsman in the entire world, and he's only an assassin because Knight's Creed really rolls off the tongue. These rewards are meaningless, and the city already has 100 hiding spots already, so adding even more isn't necessary. The other problem is that the slow, unskippable, force-locked camera sequence that plays after you save a citizen and then receive the reward plays every single time, and you are forced to a slow walk while this happens. It plays in real time too, so if a guard comes by and decides that you need to be killed, he will attack you while the camera is still locked in place. This was so frustrating to sit through, and the rewards were so pointless, that after saving 24 of them, I simply said fuck it and ignored the side mission for the rest of the game. The other missions, the investigation missions, are there to gather some knowledge on who your target is, where to find them, and how to kill them, which sounds great. But the execution deserves execution. These missions are about on the same quality and depth as a tutorial mission for a forgettable MMO that peaked at 100 players once in its lifetime. Let me explain to you exactly what you do to investigate your targets. Listen to a conversation between two people, then follow one and press and hold the pickpocket button without him seeing you. Find two people talking nearby, sit on a bench and press the eavesdrop button and listen to their conversation. Find someone alone ranting about horseshit, then punch him a few times, listen to more of his ramblings, and kill him. The next few missions are informer missions. You talk to a quest giver, do the quest, and return to him for your reward. One of these missions has you run across the city to talk to someone. One of these missions has you run in a circuit to collect some flags. One of these missions has you grab citizens and throw them into merchant stores. One of these missions has you assassinate up to 5 guards or archers without the guards seeing you, because the citizens react to you killing a guard in front of them like oil being poured into a glass of water. And one of these missions sees you walk with the informer from point A to point B, killing any guard that decides to attack him. That's all the investigation missions you'll be completing across the entire game. I managed to describe them all, each in one single sentence using 185 words. This is the core gameplay of Assassin's Creed. You need to complete a minimum of 24 of these missions out of a maximum of 54. This is what you'll be doing for hours, climbing viewpoints and completing a handful of these missions, all for what? So you can discover that you can blend in with scholars to bypass guards, or that if the gates close, you'll have to climb over the wall instead, just in case your brain switched off while playing. I really can't put into words how tedious it was to finish these repetitive, lackluster, copied and pasted content where the only variety present is the location where you complete it. Instead, I'm attempting to simulate how much of a chore these are by reusing the same phrases and jokes, if you can call them that, throughout my script. You've probably noticed, and I'm not going to stop, because this is the only way I can prove how obnoxious it was to complete these missions for the video. However, I've sacrificed a pleasant watching experience to do so, so I guess my execution deserves execution. After completing the investigation missions to unlock the assassination mission, you have to travel to the city's bureau to get permission to carry out the deed, because the game requires even more delays and paddings. You have a lengthy conversation with the bureau master here, where Altair explains exactly who his target is, where his target is going to be, and how he's going to kill him, because the game doesn't require you to complete all 6 investigation missions to do the assassination, so the game ensures that people completing the minimum number of quests will still have all the relevant information before the assassination. It really makes you wonder why you're forced to play through it then. Altair then travels to the assassination by jumping on the rooftops, and to simulate my frustration at constantly being delayed from the assassination, I'm going to delay my review of it to talk about how horrendous the freerunning is. Yes, the freerunning, one of the most iconic things about this franchise, is terrible, and here's why. Altair has a few movement options available to him on the 4 face buttons of your controller, and these actions change depending on if you're in low profile or high profile, toggled by holding the right trigger. In low profile, Altair moves at a snail's pace, can gently move past people, and can pretend he's praying while moving at an even slower pace. This mode isn't very important in the game, it's supposed to help you stay hidden, but since the guards are no threats, low profile can essentially be ignored. It's in high profile where you'll spend majority of your time, allowing Altair to move at a faster pace, and by holding A to break into a sprint, or into the freerunning mode. This is supposed to be the fast-paced, awesome, jump from rooftop to rooftop gameplay that is iconic to the series, and instead of being fun, engaging, and interesting, it's slow, boring, and monotonous. While holding A to freerun, you're no longer in control of the jumps, they become automatic, and the game judges where it thinks you want to jump by what direction you're holding the movement stick in. Sounds good, until you realize that unless you're holding the stick in the precise location you want Altair to jump in, the game will just do something else entirely. I've had Altair jump past what I wanted him to land on, or right over it, or just do something else entirely, usually resulting in me fall into the streets and having to slowly climb back up to the top. This was even occurring when I reluctantly went back into the game to see the footage you're seeing right now, while I was paying attention, and these moments where Altair quickly moves from object to object, which when it works quite well, is incredibly rare. This is because of how the camera works and how the city is designed. The idea behind escaping the guards is to break their line of sight, and then hide in a garden or with scholars or on a bench, and wait for the guards to forget about you, often leading to some hilarious moments because of how awful the guard AI is.
It's gone.
Because you need to break line of sight, the cities are almost maze-like, with roofs dipping down and beams in obscure locations, and because the camera isn't dynamic and doesn't move to where you're moving to, you must manually control the camera. This means taking your finger off the A button, losing your sprint, moving the camera so you can see where you're going, and then resuming holding A to break back into a sprint. I really don't understand why a dynamic camera wasn't implemented. But even when Altair understands exactly what you want him to do, he isn't exactly the most adept at freerunning. Altair is quite slow. He runs across beams wider than a 14-inch deck at a snail's pace, and constantly loses balance even when you land on certain objects, forcing him to stop and regain it before he can continue, or just falling off altogether if you aren't paying enough attention to press B to regain your grip. The clunky control you have over Altair, as well as the slow animations and slow pace you must play at if you don't want to risk falling, makes traversing the city tedious. But the absolute worst offender, and the part that completely baffles me as to why it was implemented, is that you're not allowed to jump too far forward at once. Being chased by guards and want to make a clutch getaway by jumping from a higher rooftop to a lower one? Well, Assassin's Creed won't let you, because if you jump too far forward at once, the game stops you in your tracks, wrestles control away from you, removes all of your forward momentum, and sends you plummeting directly to the ground. Why in the name of fuck was this implemented into the game? Why? I don't fucking understand it. I don't even know if this is a glitch. It might very well be considering I'm playing the game on PC, but it happens so consistently that I'm sure this is just a feature. Why is the freerunning so restrictive, slow, and tedious, the complete opposite of what freerunning should be? This doesn't even occur when you fuck to jump and are going to be landing on the ground regardless. Many times I jumped expecting to grab onto a wall, or onto a ledge, or land on the fucking rooftop itself, but the game doesn't let me. It forced me to the ground instead. Once you're aware of this existence, it makes freerunning even slower, because not only do you have to consider if Altair can make the jump, which he totally fucking can by the way, but you must consider if the game will allow you. It makes running around the city an absolute chore to do, and considering that the core concept of the game was built around this feature, it's almost embarrassing to see it implemented this poorly. But we're forced to use it, because it is the fastest way of getting around since I don't want to waste time pushing past citizens. After getting permission from the Bureau to kill his target, Tamir, Altair travels to the site where we sit through the tedious cutscene that is roughly 2 whole minutes long, introducing us to exactly who our target is, which really makes you wonder why the investigation phase is necessary at all. It spends all this time building this guy up to be a complete arsehole who deserves to die simply because he's a horrible person, and I'll get to this later, but the only thing we have to worry about now is that Tamir is beating up this random guy because of an insult. Now you might be wondering, why can't you just walk up to Tamir and assassinate him right here while he's distracted?
He'll be distracted with his work.
The answer is the game won't let you. There's an invisible wall blocking you, so you can't even intervene to save this person. You just idly sit by and watch him die, and then you can kill Tamir once the slow, lazy, tedious cutscene has finished playing. Now that I'm free to play, I would like you to watch my first blind attempt at this assassination in all of its glory.
Said a few coins. A few coins. All I ask is for a few coins. No, you don't understand. I have nothing.
Pathetic. Absolute.
To say that this is a letdown is an understatement. I felt like I was robbed. This assassination has as much depth as the busy work assassination missions, and these busy work missions had you do kills as meaningful as this at least 3 times, so they had even more content than this key story mission that is the entire point of the game, and one that took me just under 2 hours of my life to get to. This is where the temptation came to quit, because so far this game has been nothing but busy work, exposition, and tutorials, all leading to a lackluster assassination mission that is a complete embarrassment to video games. It's a complete punch in the gut to anyone who played Assassin's Creed, purely for these assassinations, but I stuck with it, because it is important to me that I at least see games to their completion so I can fairly appraise its quality, just in case Assassin's Creed decided to be a good game later down the line. After you kill Tamir, the game forces you into another lengthy cutscene filled with exposition, because even something as vital to the game as assassinating your target has to be slow and monotonous, so I guess I have to award points for consistency. After Tamir's dialogue, you escape from the guards, return to the bureau, and that's the end of the first memory log. I'm going to be skipping over the dialogue between Altair and the various people he talks to for now, because I'm going to tackle the narrative in one big go at the end, so stay tuned for that. For now, I'm going to stick to a walkthrough of the game, only looking at the major plot points in the narrative. Lucy brings us out of the Animus to give Desmond a break so the Animus doesn't fucking kill him, much to Vidic's disapproval, who just storms out. You can talk to Lucy here, and Desmond says exactly what's on my mind.
You won't tell me what you're looking for or why you want it, but I'm supposed to be thanking you for keeping me alive. This is so fucked.
This is a really big problem. We're 2 hours into a game driven by its narrative, and we don't even know who the assassins are, or who the Templars are, or who Vidic and Lucy is, or even who Desmond is apart from being a modern day assassin who left to go become a bartender, the dream job of every child. Desmond demands questions from Lucy, who gives him bullshit answers to keep him, and us, in the dark, but she does answer the question that the game knew I wanted answered, why everyone in the Animus speaks fluent English instead of Arabic. Desmond rests for the next day, awakes to hear Vidic's ramblings about how the world is barbaric and desperately requires order, just in case Desmond's kidnapping, the tone of his voice, and the way he treats Lucy wasn't indication enough that maybe Vidic was a bad guy, and he reminds Desmond that he's helping him reach that goal by finding it, all the description the game gives us about the treasure.
What is it then?
Now that would be telling.
And then we're back into the Animus.
Start your memory already!
Aren't you in control here? So after a lengthy exposition scene between Altair and the Master, Altair gets some of his equipment back and rides off for the next assassin.
Altair, it seems my students do not fully understand what it is to wield a blade.
After skipping the 5th tutorial, Altair walks down this path for what must be the 3rd or 4th time now, gets a horse and gallops through Kingdom to the next city, Acre, which has been captured by the Crusaders. This is another example of the game remaining faithful to history, but aside from the grim outlook and partially destroyed buildings, none of the civilians appear worried that the city is now under Crusader control. When you arrive at Acre, the guards deny you entry, so you're prompted to save a citizen being harassed outside the city walls. After saving the citizen, you blend with scholars, allowing you access to Acre. Once inside, you climb to a viewpoint, reveal the map, and get access to a number of investigation missions so you can learn about your target. After completing the required number of investigation missions, you can travel to the Bureau, where Altair explains exactly who his target is, where he'll be, and how he's going to kill him, rendering the entire investigation phase pointless. With permission from the Bureau, Altair can now finally assassinate his target. This should all sound very familiar, because it's the exact same sequence of events that happened in Damascus. If you were ever questioning my appraisal on the game being so repetitive that it became monotonous, then hopefully this changes your mind. Once you find your target, the Dr. Garnier Naplouse, you're treated to a lengthy cutscene introducing him to us, ensuring that we realize exactly who he is and why he's the scum of the earth that needs to be killed. Much like Tamir, there's an invisible wall, so you can't assassinate him while he's standing right there or intervene to save this prisoner. Once he leaves, you just find him standing around, press X and finish the assassination. That's it, that's the whole mission. Blend in with scholars, find your target, press X. After the Doctor's death, you get another slow exposition dump, escape the guards, return to the Bureau, fast travel back to the Master for yet another slow exposition dump, another piece of equipment is returned to, and thankfully there's no visit from this guy. And then, to get to the 3rd assassination, we walk to a horse, gallop, 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 hey look it's Jerusalem, save a citizen, blend with scholars, climb a viewpoint, synchronize, investigate mission, climb a viewpoint, press Y, investigate mission, talk to the Bureau, ask Malik if he needs a hand with anything, Altair explains the mission and now you're licensed to kill, so go kill Talal the Slaver. Hopefully the amount of recycled content this game has is starting to come to light. Talal's assassination stood out for me because it was slightly different to the other ones. Instead of watching him be a complete arsehole, we get an interesting bit of dialogue and then the gameplay. Talal sets his goons on you, which would be interesting if it wasn't exactly the same as all the other fights in the game, and if you still saw the guards as threats, this mission is the one that confirms that they're jokes, and that Altair should just become a knight. Altair kills these guards, chases Talal, who was standing right fucking there for some reason, you chase him for a little bit, and then bada bim bada boom, Bob's your fucking uncle. Exposition, escape, Boo, end of memory log. We're 3 assassinations deep and writing about these missions has become a chore. After this memory log, the Animus is overheating, so like every normal person, Desmond just waits and casually gets out. It's not like that machine that's overheating could kill you or anything. After Vidic leaves, Lucy tells us that she oversaw the assembly of the Animus, explaining why she's important to the story at all and why she's the go-to girl for Animus repairs, and that's about it. Desmond returns to his room and...
What the hell? Someone's been in here.
Yeah, someone was probably in here just to change the sheets or something. Anyway, you examine the open closet and you find an access code to open Desmond's room, and from now on you can leave whenever you want and explore the room the Animus is kept in, and you can still lose his access card and read her emails. You know, remember when I mentioned that the wide shots in this part of the game were from the perspective of a security camera? So why the hell is Abstergo, the guys Vidic and Lucy works for, letting Desmond, someone they obviously want to keep away from the details, roam freely in their facility and read emails with private company information? It's revealed later in the game that there are actually people watching, so why are they letting Desmond do whatever the fuck he wants? More importantly, how does Lucy not realize that Desmond has her access card, or Vidic when you eventually pickpocket his like Lucy's emails suggest that you do? It just makes no fucking sense at all. Also, the emails, I'll tackle them later in the narrative bit. The next day you awake with Vidic and an exposition about Abstergo, finally. Abstergo Industries is responsible for all the major breakthroughs of humanity, which they license to various other companies and people to avoid suspicion. However, Abstergo doesn't actually invent anything, they simply find stuff.
To be fair, we don't invent them. We find them.
Find them.
They're gifts, Mr. Miles, from those who came before.
And it's here that Desmond should question Vidic about the treasure that we know is called a piece of Eden from the Doctor's dialogue.
I admit, without the piece of Eden, which you stole from us.
But no, Desmond is still very inconvenienced by the kidnapping and simply wants to get through this week with as little hassle and effort as possible. So, we're back in the Animus, back as Altair, back to more of the same. There's more exposition and the Master tells us the guards will be more alert to our presence. I think this is supposed to indicate a jump in difficulty, but I never really noticed it. You skip over the 6th tutorial and then return to travel across Kingdom. What the fuck? Fast travel? Wow. Remember when I said that Kingdom should be removed because it would only improve the gameplay and streamline the experience? Well, Assassin's Creed agrees because now you can just skip straight to the cities, so it really makes you wonder why Kingdom exists at all. Now, before we continue, the gameplay that is the investigation phase of the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th assassinations are all identical. So I'm going to skip straight to the assassination missions to save time, because honestly, I don't think I need to explain the exact same sequence of events 6 more times to convince people that Assassin's Creed's gameplay is boring, repetitive, and tedious. The 4th assassination sees you killing a greedy merchant king, Abul Naquad, who is one ugly motherfucker, throwing a party for people who hate him while providing free food.
I trust everything is to your satisfaction.
I wonder what the chances are that the food is poisoned. After lecturing his guests about stuff, they all begin to die of poisoned food, and in the chaos you chase him down and kill him. And this isn't interesting like chasing Talal was, because this guy clearly isn't capable at escaping. Exposition, escape, boo, master,
Altair!
fast travel. The 5th assassination is this guy named William, who is a crusader but at odds with King Richard and a complete dick to his men. Like in all the good introduction scenes, there's an invisible wall, so you can't kill William until this is over, despite how funny it would be to kill him in front of Richard. You travel to the back of this fortress and find William berating his men. What a dick. Now, you're supposed to wait through this and kill William while he's alone. I thought you were able to jump down and do an aerial assassination, but the game wouldn't let me, mostly because it's not actually in the game. So, I jumped down to this lower platform to try and was instantly spotted. So instead of running, I fought my way through to William because Altair is overpowered in combat. Exposition, escape. Boo, master. This conversation is worth mentioning because it's the first bit of exposition we get in the entire game about who the fuck the Templars are. The Templars are led by this guy, who we met half an hour into the game and was blatantly told was our sworn enemy.
That man is our greatest enemy.
But we never hear from him again until his assassination. The Templars want to seize the Holy Land, not for the Crusaders, but for themselves, to create a new world, killing anyone in their way. Finally, almost 8 hours into the game, and we're finally told about what the Templars are trying to do. And after this, we're back to the same gameplay loop, and then the next assassination. Majd Adin is the most boring target in the game. He's a megalomaniac, and that's it. You find him at one of his public executions, interrupt it, and kill him. In my attempt of this, I was pushed into a guard by a drunk civilian, so I was spotted almost instantly, which the cutscene made very clear was a bad idea. But I stayed and killed all the guards as well as Majd, who stayed and fought instead of running. His dialogue is also just, I did it because it was fun, because I liked the power, and then Altair just stabs him again, nothing interesting, it's a complete waste of time. Escape, boo, and end of memory log. I managed to describe about 3 to 4 hours of gameplay in 600 words by the way, just in case how little content this video game hasn't sunk in yet. Desmond awakes to Vidic scolding him because Desmond's assassin buddies are planning to rescue him, and he storms out. It's here that we also learn that Abstergo and its employers are modern-day Templars, finally. And Lucy explains this.
But they are the bad guys, right?
If there's one thing I've learned since I started working here, it's that there's no such thing. It's all so relative.
Which we'll get to. Anyway, rest up,
Get in the Animus.
load up. This is some exposition worth mentioning as well, because we're finally properly introduced to the treasure the game's plot revolves around, the Piece of Eden. The Master explains that this is the power of temptation, and is the explanation behind many of the Bible's miracles.
He who holds it commands the hearts and minds of whoever looks upon it, whoever tastes of it, as they say.
From here, I think it's obvious what the Templars want. They want to use the Piece of Eden to brainwash the Holy Land citizens, kill anyone who resists its temptation, and in doing so, creating peace and order in a new world, a perfect utopia. Altair demands that the Templars must be stopped because their methods are evil, and yes, their methods are evil, and then the Master warns Altair of the guards being able to easily spot him, as they now know what they look like. Supposed to be another jump in difficulty, but this is how the guards reacted to me.
Leave, peasant.
After the same old gameplay loop, we arrive at the 7th assassination. Jubair al-Hakim is burning all the books of knowledge, and I wonder what the chances are he's going to top them. Jubair and his followers spread out in a city, and this is the only assassination worth playing because you have to actually find your target. In the investigation phase, you learn that Jubair is dressed like his followers, except he wears a pouch. You can also just notice this in his introduction, but it's worth mentioning since this is the only time you learn something in the investigation phase that's relevant to the assassination itself. There's a few spots where Jubair and his followers could be, and luckily for me, I guessed correctly. Exposition, escape, boo, fast travel to the Master. Man, even this sequence is becoming a chore. The Master finally tells us where the assassins stand on the matter between them and the Templars. They want to educate people to be good-willed and to understand the world that they live in instead of brainwashing them like the Templars are planning to do. The end result is still the same, peace and order, but the methods are very different. Anyway, after this gameplay loop, I'm not putting that in. I am not putting that in. And the 8th assassination. Your target is Sabrand, who oversees the Crusade's navy and has become very paranoid since all his other Templar buddies have been killed by Altair. So paranoid in fact that his introduction is him killing one of his own scholars because he thinks that he's an assassin. And while this is happening, you can't interrupt and can't kill him because there's the invisible wall again. This is the most ridiculous introduction of them all, because the Master even warned us that the guards know what Altair looks like and will be incredibly sensitive to his presence.
His remaining followers will do their best to expose you. They know you come, the man in the white hood.
This should also apply to Sabrand. So why the fuck is Sabrand killing this scholar and then gloating to the audience while Altair stands within that same audience in plain fucking sight? He even stares right at Altair when he says,
I doubt we've seen the last of these assassins. Persistent bastards!
It's very pathetic. How is this level of oversight achieved? Then Sabrand walks off to one of his boats and you can assassinate him, but not until he gets onto the boat and sails off. Only then is the invisible wall taken away and you can walk over to him and then press X. Exposition, escape, boo, end of memory log. We awake to Vidic being pressured to get that final memory. We learn that Lucy isn't really sided with the Templars because she thinks their methods are really bad, because the Templars still want to form the new world, and she and Desmond have to stop them. Somehow.
You've gotten the lecture from Vidic about what's wrong with the world, how we need order and discipline, so they're going to give it to us. Only we don't have a say in the matter. We have to stop them, Desmond.
It's here where the story picks up, because unlike before, we now know who the Templars are and what they want, as well as what the Assassins want, as well as what the Piece of Eden does. We also finally learn what Altair's memory is useful for. The Piece of Eden at Messiah was destroyed in an accident, so Altair's memory should tell the Templars the locations of other pieces of Eden, and they can use one's power to build a new world. I'll come back to this later, but for now we'll acknowledge that we know this and move on. Next morning, Vidic reminds us that he's a Templar with his speech, in case you're playing without a brain, and explains why we're seeing in the Animus isn't quite how history portrays it.
Some of it seems to contradict what the Animus is showing me.
Anyone can write a book, and they can put whatever they want on its pages.
This is the story bit that was a nice touch I mentioned earlier. In the Animus, you go through some master exposition, and your final target is Robert. Finally, he's relevant to the story again. You go through the same gameplay loop, and the final assassination. Robert is attending Maj Adin's funeral as a sign of peace and cooperation between the Crusaders and Saracens, and it's here during this time where Altair plans to kill Robert. What a gentleman. Then, you know, I'd usually complain about the invisible wall and the long introduction leading to insultingly easy gameplay, but no, because Robert spots Altair and ambushes him.
Bring him forward, that God's justice might be done!
The resulting fight was the only time in Assassin's Creed that I nearly died, not counting all the times where I was fucked from the stupid freerunning and fell into water. You must fight the Templars here while being rained down by archers, and when you get hit by archers, Altair loses balance and can't counter. So these guys started kicking my ass. This is the only time in the whole game where I was challenged, because this is the only time in the whole game where I was fighting guards and archers at the same time. Now, at the final assassination, I was only now fighting both guards and archers. This was the most enjoyable part of the game for me, not because it was a dramatic change of gameplay, but because I didn't realize that the archers were putting me off balance until I was nearly dead. So I was trying to find and kill the archers while being constantly chased by these guards, and if I stopped moving, they'd catch up and kill me. This was quite the challenge, but after killing the archers, the combat reverts to the same spam X until you win like the rest of the game, which is a shame. You eventually get to Robert and you discover that it's not really Robert, it's a double. The double explains that Robert is talking to Richard and Saladin, Sultan of Egypt, to unite their armies against the Assassins since Altair has killed both Crusaders and Saracens. And
had, perhaps. But now you've given them one. 9, in fact.
Not 9. 8. You are not my target. I will not take your life.
I'm also going to take this opportunity to mention ludonarrative dissonance again, so you think I'm even more intelligent than I already know I am.
escape your failed assassination attempt and chase after Robert, who is currently at the battle for a serf. You just walk out of the city, by the way, the same city that was just in high alert looking for Altair for an assassination attempt, but because he walked into the booth for a few minutes and the bell stopped ringing, all the guards didn't give a shit anymore. You gallop to a serf for one last ride through Kingdom and find Robert and stop him from convincing everyone to siege Messiah. On your way to Robert, you are stopped by multiple guards, both Saracen and Crusader alike, and because I had already killed hundreds of guards already, I wanted to get to Robert as quickly as possible. But the game wouldn't let me. I had to waste time fighting 4 waves of guards to let down this wall and allow me to progress. But hey, at least it wasn't invisible this time. This doesn't work from a narrative stance because you're supposed to rush from Robert to stop him from sieging Messiah, and it doesn't work from a gameplay stance because the combat is as difficult as it was in the tutorial, so it's just more tedious padding. You do this 4 times as well, so this section becomes as repetitive as the rest of the game, so points for consistency. Once you get to Robert, you get Altair and Robert arguing over who's right, Richard can't decide and lets it be decided by combat. So you fight through a 5th wave of guards to finally fight and kill Robert. Robert tells Altair that the Master was using him to kill all the Templars, so he could use the Piece of Eden to brainwash the Holy Land himself and become the Supreme Overlord. This explains how the Master knew so much about the Templars throughout all of his slow and lazy exposition, and how he even formed the list of Altair's 9 targets in the first place. Robert dies, and now Altair goes off to confront the Master. He tries to convince Richard to end the crusade because Saladin would like peace as much as he would, but Richard scoffs at Altair's attempts and claims that Saladin is a cunt, and the crusade continues, but it was a nice try. Desmond awakes to the sound of gunfire. The assassin's rescue attempt is in progress, but it fails. Vidic explains to Desmond that that's it, no one else is coming to save him because Abstergo had been hunting down and killing the last few modern day assassins, and Desmond reacts to this revelation like oil being poured into a glass of water. Yeah, I mean, your whole family died, you should at least be a little bit happy. You don't get a reaction until you talk to Lucy, and it's very believable.
What are you talking about? They just killed, literally killed, my only chance of getting out of here. And then I find out the assassins are all but destroyed, and Christ, I still don't know what these people are planning. But I do know they plan to kill me when they're done.
Lucy reassures Desmond that the camp was simply deserted, and that maybe the assassins had indeed escaped. She then reveals to Desmond that things will be okay, shows him her hand with a missing ring finger, marking her as an assassin, and then she leaves. This revelation gives Desmond some hope, but there's a few problems. How the fuck has Lucy not been caught? Abstergo are Templars, they should know how to find assassins, and they do.
Is that there aren't any assassins left to come for you. We've been very busy this past year, hunting down your little enclaves, your desert communes and whatnot.
Lucy hasn't been concealing her hand throughout the entire game. She wasn't wearing any gloves or keeping it in a pocket, she was doing nothing, it's just out there for everyone to see. So how does Vidic not realize this? He works with Lucy, and the two have a history.
Warren saved my life, so if he wants to yell a little, let him.
How the fuck has Vidic not ever once noticed that she's missing a finger that would allow him to easily figure out that she's an assassin? It was his theories that created the Animus, so Vidic isn't stupid by any sense of the imagination, so how he can miss Lucy's missing finger is beyond me. More importantly, every wide shot has been seen through the lens of a camera, and Lucy's hands are visible, they're right there for everyone to see as she works in the Animus. She's standing there for what we can safely assume is hours a day, every day for a week. How have the people peering into the room never once noticed that one of their own is missing a finger, ergo an assassin? Look, if it was just for the week, maybe she could have concealed it, but Lucy has worked with Abstergo for a while now. How has this never been noticed in any of the previous tests that she and Vidic have worked on? How has Abstergo never noticed this blatantly obvious fact? The history of the assassins makes this even worse, because the missing ring finger is described to be a handicap, because the assassins could be recognized by this fact alone. All the way back in the 12th century, the missing finger was used to recognize assassins, so much so that the hidden blade was modified to prevent this sacrifice from being necessary. Assassin's Creed is set in the 21st century. How Lucy has managed to remain working for Abstergo while obviously being an assassin without concealing her hand is beyond me. This either means that Abstergo is staffed by fucking idiots, or there's a shocking revelation about Lucy's character in the future games. So Desmond doesn't cry himself to sleep and is awoken earlier than usual because Vidic is desperate to get that final memory.
Today is a historic day, one that will be remembered for years to come. Remembered by some of us, anyway.
Just in case you don't have a brain and didn't realize that Vidic is planning to kill Desmond after this, just in case. Altair returns the Messiah for a scripted narrative finale. The assassins Altair grew up with have all been brainwashed, so the Master has started using the Piece of Eden. You walk up to the castle to confront him, but are stopped by some assassin buddies, and you engage in yet another fight scene. These assassins still have the same guard AI, so this fight isn't any different. Then reinforcements arrive, and it's funny to see the same jump limitation applied to these guys as well. During this fight, Malik interrupts and scares all the assassins away, because he returned to Solomon's Temple after his reflection session with Altair, and found Robert's diary that had in very clear writing, "The Master is a Templar," and he was using the assassins to carry out his dirty work and include a path for his domination. Malik goes to distract the other guards, and Altair goes to kill the Master.
The men we face, their minds are not their own. If you can avoid killing them.
When Altair gets to the Master blabs on about true power and how he's so strong compared to Altair, and why he could never tempt Altair with a Piece of Eden, and then the two fight, 3 times until the Master dies. The Master is convinced that the Piece of Eden is the only way to bring peace to the world, for he knows that the world's people are too fixated on their beliefs to be converted without force. Altair disagrees and exclaims that the Piece of Eden must be destroyed. The Master laughs at him some more when Altair can't do it, then the hologram is displayed, and this is what Vidic was after.
We've got it.
Desmond is then ejected from the Animus. We see this conversation through the security camera in the eyes of Vidic's employers. Vidic explains that at least half a dozen other pieces of Eden were located, and then the employer demands that teams be sent to all the locations to gather as many pieces of Eden as possible, in case you don't have a brain and didn't realize that the Templars were going to retrieve the Pieces of Eden. Lucy stops Vidic from killing Desmond, saying that he could still be useful to them and isn't worth risking losing potential information to kill someone you already have in your custody, which is logical. The employer agrees, and Lucy and Vidic leave the room. We're then cut to Desmond's first-person view, and oh look, he has Altair's eagle vision now, probably because of too much exposure to the Animus, and Desmond reacts to this really mundanely. Desmond can see all the hidden writing over the walls, all over the facility, which really makes you wonder what Abstergo security was doing, allowing previous test subjects to just write on the walls. Desmond walks into his quarters, sees this wall of text, the camera zooms in, and the credits roll. And that's it. That's Assassin's Creed, and it is incredible at how devoid of actual content this game is. Let me break it down. I played Assassin's Creed for about 13 hours. If you go all the way to the credits, I spent about 16 minutes in the assassination missions, 28 if you count the gauntlet in a surf to get to Robert, and an extra 5 minutes in the final 3 fights of the game, for a total of 33 minutes and 22 seconds, a measly 4% of my overall time. The rest of it was sitting through lengthy exposition and doing repetitive busy work to get to these missions, of which maybe 2 were worth playing. I understand why I felt like I was robbed earlier, because I was. This amount of content is quite frankly insulting, considering that by the time you pass the half-an-hour mark, you're still in the game's first scripted narrative tutorial. Since the gameplay's quality and quantity is horrible, the only thing that can save it is the narrative, and since so much of the game is dedicated to this, it's only fair for me to at least try and give it some analysis. The narrative is split into 2 halves. During the present day, we see Desmond and the modern day Templars continuing their quest for the New World, and during the Third Crusade, we see Altair's story. I'm going to discuss Altair's story first because it is by far the best part of the game. I criticized the game earlier for not giving us any details early in the story, and to clarify this, I don't mean that we need exposition about exactly who the Templars and Assassins are from the very beginning. The whole story is about the unraveling of these details, and to be honest, it was interesting, but these details come so late into the plot that it's hard to care at the beginning. Slow stories that build to something usually have a carrot on the end of a stick to keep its audiences engaged and hooked. All Assassin's Creed has at the end of its stick is the promise of a carrot. From the very beginning, we're told simply that these men must die. We don't know who these people are, or what they're doing, or why they need to die, or any of that, which again makes it incredibly hard to care. The story at the beginning doesn't look like a story that wants to tell a story. It looks like a story that wants to provide an excuse for gameplay to happen, a reason for Altair to kill 9 people, an excuse for there to be 9 missions. For purposes of saving time, I'm going to be ignoring the dialogue between the Master and Altair between missions, because most of it is absolute horseshit, except for the meaningful exposition about the Templars and Assassins I've already touched on. It makes sense for it to be horseshit though. The Master is preying on Altair's devotion to the Creed to carry out his dirty work, paving the way to his domination over the Holy Land. So then the story we're supposed to care about is Altair's slow realization that the Creed is a lie, and he's told this through the dialogue of his dying targets. It's in these dying words that we get the most exposition about the Templars and their cause. We learn that Altair's targets are connected as early as Tamir.
Just like my brothers.
Brothers?
Ah, but he thinks I act alone. I am but a piece.
And we learn about the Piece of Eden and its use as early as the Doctor, without it being thrown into your face. His other targets confirm that the Templars reject God, and that's why they're plotting against the Crusaders and the Saracens, because they're both blinded by faith.
You don't believe?
How could I, given what I know, what I've seen? Our treasure was the proof.
Proof of what?
That this life is all we have.
The Templars know about the Piece of Eden's power, so they also know that the faith that these two factions believe in and will start wars over is false, and prevents a world full of peace. And that's all the Templars want, peace, although their intended method of using the Piece of Eden robs the citizens of this world of their free will, and that's evil, which is something the Assassins frown upon and seek to prevent. Even though the Templars' end goal is ironically identical to the Assassins. It makes Lucy's dialogue here more meaningful.
But they are the bad guys, right?
If there's one thing I've learned since I started working here, it's that there's no such thing. It's all so relative.
And for the sake of good storytelling, I sincerely hope that Lucy has actually defected from the Assassins, because it allows more exploration of the idea that these supposed sworn enemies aren't all that different. This realization is the best part of Assassin's Creed by far, and it paves the way for a complex and interesting continuation, since we also learn that modern-day Templars and Assassins are still fixated on their old beliefs. All the information we learn through Altair is applicable to Desmond's story. That's also the problem, however, because regardless of how good understanding the conflict between the Assassins and the Templars may be, it's the only part of Altair's story that means anything. Altair begins by being completely devoted to the Creed. The commentary from the Templars shows that they have been enlightened, that the faith that others blindly follow is nothing but lies, which needs to be exterminated for there to be peace. This is ironically a parallel to Altair's situation.
All that matters is the Master considers it important.
Although he was too arrogant to realize this. By the ninth assassination, as discovered between the conversation between him and Malik, Altair begins to act without the Creed's permission. He's beginning to question what he believes and act accordingly.
You must return to Masyaf. We cannot act without our Master's permission.
Stop hiding behind words, Malik. You wield the Creed and its tenets like some shield. He's keeping things from us. Important things. You were the one told me we could never know anything, only suspect.
Much like the Templars do. This is foreshadowed by the Merchant King's dialogue.
A minor evil for a greater good? We are the same.
No, we are nothing alike.
Ah, but I see it in your eyes. You doubt.
Then we get Altair's realization that everything he's ever lived for is a lie. The Master and the Assassins, the thing that Altair has presumably devoted his entire life to, has been nothing but a lie, and he's been nothing but a useless pawn. By killing the Master, Altair puts an end to the scheme he unknowingly caused, and then when we reach to the part of Altair's story where we see the payoff of this character development, and Altair coming to terms with everything he's ever lived for being a lie, we're abruptly removed from that story and we return to the present day. We're reminded that the best part of Assassin's Creed's story doesn't fucking matter. All that matters is that Vidic and Lucy saw Altair witnessing the hologram. That's it. That's the only thing in the entire plot that matters, because we don't play as Altair, we play as Desmond, and Desmond's story is shit. Desmond is an unbelievable, uncharismatic, useless individual who doesn't stop for a second to think about anything he's seeing in the Animus, even though he's got literally nothing better to do for the week aside from sleeping. He just sits back, blindly, and learns absolutely nothing, despite all the information the Animus provides to people paying attention. The only conflict that is resolved at the end of Desmond's story is that Vidic and Lucy got the map. We don't know jack shit about Desmond himself, except that he's an assassin and a bartender. We know nothing about Vidic except that he is a Templar, and nothing about Lucy except that she's an assassin whose true allegiance is certainly uncertain. We don't even learn much about Abstergo, although this is what the emails are for, but it only introduces us to more things such as Layla, Test Subject 16, other potential items, and a satellite for some reason, just more exposition. It doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't answer any questions, but it raises even more. The game is so devoid of information and so full of mystery that I was almost certain there was going to be a mid-game bait and switch like in Portal and Infinifactory, where the story shifts to a new perspective and goes from there, but that never happened. The whole main plot with Desmond is simply just exposition, setting the stage for another game story to come and perform on. Vidic's mysterious employers and Desmond's eagle vision that happens in the last 5 minutes are shoehorned in as bait to entice this game's audience to return for more. Altair's development over the course of the game is the only story the game properly tells, and it fizzles out into nothing as we return to the modern day, back to worthless Desmond. And if you're unconvinced that Assassin's Creed's story is lackluster, bare, and tedious, much like the rest of the game points for consistency, let me retell it in 100 words. Abstergo, Vidic, and maybe possibly Lucy are Templars, after the treasure known as the Piece of Eden that allows them to tempt other people, brainwashing them. They want to use its power to brainwash as many people as possible, exterminating those who resist the temptation to achieve a utopia. Through Desmond and the Animus, they view the memories of Altair, and find the memory of Altair witnessing a hologram indicating the location of other pieces of Eden scattered across the world. Vidic sends these to his employers, who I assume is just Abstergo, and they go off to find them. I can't recommend Assassin's Creed for its gameplay, and I can't recommend it for its story. And since these are the only two things that Assassin's Creed offers, I can't recommend playing this tech demo at all. The core concept is fantastic, but it needed a lot of work, revisions, and polish before it could realize its potential. I will be playing and looking at Assassin's Creed 2 sometime in the future, because I'm interested in how the story will continue to develop, and I hope that the gameplay sees some major improvements. Assassin's Creed is the worst game I've ever played, and I sincerely hope that the series can only get better from here. Thank you so much for watching the video. Even if you didn't watch all of it and only saw some of the bite-sized sections, it really does mean a lot to me. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. I will be making more videos looking at games critically, and I can almost promise that my future reviews will not be as negative as this one. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you next time.